Matthew 5, verse 4 says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." We're on a series out of the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes, as was mentioned earlier, is Jesus' sermon that he preached from the Mount. Jesus says, "Blessed are those who mourn." How could Jesus say, "Happy that you mourn"? If we remember, that's what we decided or came to the conclusion, that the word blessed means to be happy. And so in essence, Jesus is saying, happy are those who mourn. I've done many funerals. And almost to a T, they're sad occasions. Now, some are a little bit more joyous than others. Some are celebratory. I've had folk that say, when I die, I want all singing and hear the songs I want. We had church. And there were others that we preached, and the service was just so sorrowful and mournful and heavy. And that's not a fault. It's just that sometimes it's just hard. People weep and they mourn. And so for someone to come along and say to you, be happy when you mourn, it's not an easy proposition. But I like Jesus because Jesus doesn't end it there. There's a comma. And following the comma, it says, "For they shall be comforted." You see, the happy is connected to the comfort. Jesus doesn't leave the mourners to suffer in their plight. He gives a promise of relief and hope for a brighter tomorrow. Years ago, an S-4 submarine was rammed by a ship off the coast of Massachusetts. It sank immediately to the ocean floor, and the entire crew was trapped inside this prison house of death. Every effort was made to rescue the crew, but ultimately it failed. Near the end of the ordeal, a deep-sea diver who was part of the rescue crew thought he heard tapping on the wall of the submarine. He placed his helmet up against the side of the vessel, and he realized that it was Morse code. In his mind, he spelled out the message that was being tapped from within. It repeated the same question. Is there any hope? Is there any hope? Is there any hope? Last week we talked about those that were in places of difficulty and hardship. And the question that you ask yourself is there a way out? Is there hope that things will turn around? Is there hope that things will get better? And we can list those things that confront us in our lives, everything from seeking employment. And there may be employment, but is it in the area that I want, at the wage point that I need? And is there any way I'm going to get out of this morass? Perhaps it's a health condition that you've been struggling with for years, and there seems to be no end point. Or at least the end seems as if it's not going to be in your best interest. Is there any hope? Perhaps your situation is not terminal, but nonetheless, it's heavy on you. It's tough to get past. How do you get out of this situation? You see, when Jesus enters into a situation, he comes to bring relief. Jesus doesn't come to be an uninterested bystander. He comes to get involved in our situation. Take the story recorded in Mark chapter 9. It's a story about Jesus healing a boy possessed by an impure spirit. And beginning at verse 14 in the King James Version, it reads, "And when he came to his disciples, he saw a great multitude about them, and the scribes questioning with them. And straightway all the people, when they beheld him, were greatly amazed, and running to him, saluted him. And he asked the scribes, what question ye with them?" And so he's saying to the scribes, what are you asking my disciples about? What are you questioning them about? And one of the interesting things, we know that Jesus Christ is God in the flesh with all knowledge and foreknowledge. And so Jesus really is asking them the question for them to give him the answer that he already knows the answer to. But he asked them anyway. He says, what is it that you're asking them about? And one of the multitude answered and said, Master, I have brought unto thee my son, which hath a dumb spirit. And wheresoever he taketh him, he teareth him, and he foameth, and gnasheth with his teeth, and pineth away. And I spake to thy disciples that they should cast him out, and they could not. See, there are a lot of us walking around claiming to have the power. We can speak to anything, and we can declare and decree. He answered and said, O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him to me. We need to know when it's time to take our situation to Jesus. Because you've been banging your head against the wall and can't seem to make progress. Maybe it's time you realize that you need to take it to Jesus. Verse 20, and they brought him unto him, and when he saw him, straightway the spirit tear him. See, the spirit says, okay, you can bring me wherever you want me, but I'm going to show out. If this guy Jesus can fix it, he's going to have to show he can fix it, because I'm going to show out right in the presence. See, sometimes we think that just because he's there that the enemy is going to back off. Sometimes the enemy intensifies. And your situation may not get better. It may actually tend to get worse. He fell on the ground and wallowed foaming. And he asked the father, how long is it ago since this came unto him? And he said, of a child. That's how long he's been having these issues. He says, and oft times it cast him in the fire, into the waters to destroy him. But if thou canst do anything, have, circle that word, compassion on us. And what? Help us. The father says, this is a family issue. My boy is in trouble, but it's affecting all of us. Help us, Jesus, help us. I'm tired of seeing my son go through this. I'm sick and tired of being helpless and unable to help my child. And you're the last resort. I'm bringing him to you. Help us. And here's Jesus' response to him. Jesus said unto him, if thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth. I wrestled with this passage a long time. I've been saved since I was 9, and I've been to college and seminary, and I struggle with this because often in our lives we wonder, where is my belief? Can I believe enough? Do I have enough faith to make things happen? And so here's what happens in verse 24. And straightway the father of the child cried and said with tears, Lord, I believe. But here is his humanity. And this has been a verse that I have latched on to. Because it's us. If you want to know where you are, this is you. This is me. He says, Lord, I believe. But he recognized even in his acknowledgement of his trust and faith in God, there was a part of him that was struggling. There was a part of him that was wrestling. There was a part of him that just couldn't quite make that next leap. And he says, Lord, but help my unbelief. He said, there's a part of me that's still a little bit reticent. There's a part of me that hadn't quite gotten over the line. There's a part of me that's looking to the right, part of me that's looking to the left. There's a part of me that's unsure. He says, God, I believe, but there's a part of me that's just kind of. And so he says, God, I need you to bolster that part of me. I want you to strengthen that part of me that's weak, that's doubting, that wants to cash it in. When Jesus saw that the people came running together, he rebuked the foul spirit, saying unto him, Thou dumb and deaf spirit, I charge thee, come out of him and enter no more into him. And the spirit cried and rent him sore, and that means he's going to get his last lick in. That's what it means. He's going to get his last throw in. And then it says, and he came out of him, and he was as one dead, insomuch that many said, he is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And I like to tell you, because here he's saying, I don't know that he was literally dead, but I think he was just so exhausted. I've shared with you several instances in the past where I believe I was in the presence of a demonic possession. And I can remember one of them very clearly, that when the ordeal was all over, the individual was so exhausted, so spent, they were out like a light. And so that's what I think happened. He was just, the spirit, the evil spirit had just exhausted him, taken every ounce of strength out of him. And when he was gone, he just collapsed. And Jesus touched him and raised him up. The Bible, verse 28 says, and when he was coming to the house, his disciples asked him privately, why could we not cast him out? And he said unto them, this kind can come forth by nothing but by prayer and fasting. Sometimes we enter into the arena of the spirit realm unprepared. We go in without the armor of God. We go in without the tools necessary to make it happen. Jesus gives them the formula. You see, hope had arisen in the Father. And so Jesus says to him, to those who mourn, he says to us who mourn, how do I get comfort? How do I find hope in the midst of my situation? And there are three things that will be done today. I want to run to them. Number one, he says, we need to recognize what kind of God he is. If I want to be happy in my mourning, if I want to receive the comfort of God, I must recognize what kind of God he is. And the first thing is that he is a God of compassion. The 86th Psalm, verse 15 says, but you, Lord, are a compassionate and gracious God. We recognize that compassion isn't just feeling sorry. Compassion is doing something about our empathy. Compassion is going the next step. Compassion is saying, I see the need. I'm going to move toward the need. Recognize that God is a God of compassion. See, when you're going through a hard time, you need to recognize that God understands where you are. He sees you. And he's compassionate towards you. He is full of mercy and comfort. In 2 Corinthians 1:3, it says, praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of what? Compassion, mercy, and the God of all comfort. When we were children, when we were hurt, or scared, we ran to mommy. And as long as we could get to mommy, all was good in the world. Because mommy's arms provided comfort. Mommy's arms provided safety and rest. God is full of mercy. He is the God of comfort. And he wants to be and he is close to you. Psalm 23, that famous psalm that we love, the 23rd Psalm, verse 4 says that even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. And here's it. For you are with me. What is your situation right now? Some of you have been dealing with some hard, dark valleys for the longest. And there seems to be no end. But here's the joy part of it. Here is the wonderful part about it. God says, I'm not telling you won't have your dark valley. I'm not telling you there won't be your difficult times, but I will tell you what? I will be what? With you. I will be there to comfort you. I will be there to embrace you in the midst of your valley experiences. None of us lives on the mountaintop all the time. Every one of us has valley experiences. And that's what life is. Life is some time on the mountain and some time in the valley. And amazingly, we all want to live on the mountaintop. But do you know the interesting thing about the mountaintop? The mountaintop is usually the most sparse, drab place. You may see more, but there's not a whole lot there. You don't have a whole lot of crop growing on the mountaintop. Most of that crop growing is down in the valley. That fertile soil is down in the valley. That stream is running through the valley. And so even though the valley is hard, the valley is the place that we can find nourishment. Oh, I want those mountaintop experiences because they make life wonderful. We see the vistas of life. But you can't live up there the whole time because it's like flying in a plane. I remember one time I flew in a plane and it was raining. And it was the first time I consciously was made aware of it. I don't remember how old I was. I don't remember when it was. You know, you just know that it happened. We took off and it was raining. And as the plane gained altitude, it went in the clouds. And it's doing this rocking, and, you know, and it's going, and before you knew it, it rose above the clouds. And all of a sudden, it was bright. The shaking stopped. And the plane was just gliding along above the clouds. And what it reminded me of is that what? Above the cloud, the sun is always shining. And that's what we're looking for when we say, God, bring hope and comfort. We're looking to get through the clouds and above it so that we see the sunshine. God says there's hope in me. You need to recognize what kind of God I am. I'm the God that will take you out of the valley, onto the mountaintop, through the clouds, and into the beautiful celestial air of God's blessing. That's where I want to take you. Know who God is. God doesn't come along and says, just suffer in your stuff. God says, I will be with you. I want to be close to you. Because you're precious to God. That's why. And there's something that we all need to learn. And here's something interesting. Point number two. We need to realize our worth to God. Why would he do this for me? Why would you do it? You sacrifice for your children because you love them. You go without so your children can have because you love them. Why? Because they're worth something to you. We begin realizing our worth to God, but let's start at the beginning. And first of all, I'm sinful. That's what you need to recognize. I'm sinful. You say, but how is that worthy to God? Well, stay with me. Well, we got to begin at the beginning. And the beginning is that all have sinned and fall short of God's glorious ideal. God's standard is established, and every one of us falls short of God's standard. We're sinners by birth. That's who we are. And once we acknowledge that, we can begin this process of learning to live in God's power. Because not only am I sinful and admitting my sinfulness, but I am exposed. You can't hide from God. You can't hide from God. Luke 12:2 says, there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. And Adam sinned, and God came, and he says, Adam, where are you? You got to understand, God is God. God sees him. God knows where he is. He says, Adam, where are you? Adam said, I knew you were coming. I was naked, and I hid from you. How do you hide from God? How do you hide from God? You can't. And so he says there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed. In other words, saying what you do in the dark will come to the light. So that's who we are. We're sinful and we're exposed, but we're also broken but loved. So this is where the door turns on its hinge. I am all of that. I'm sinful. My sin is exposed. I am broken, but guess what? I'm loved. I may be messed up, but I'm loved. I may be broken, but I'm loved. I may be unacceptable to some, but I'm loved. I may feel stuck, but I'm loved. I'm loved. Jeremiah 31:3, let's look at that together. He says, my love is unfailing. The Lord appeared to us in the past saying, I have loved you with a what? Everlasting love. An everlasting love. Wow. And I have drawn you with an unfailing kindness. I like that word unfailing. The unfailing means that it never ends. It doesn't break down. It doesn't disintegrate. It doesn't go away. It's unfailing. It's enduring. That's what God is saying. God is saying, I have loved you with an enduring love. Some of you were boxing fans back in the day when boxing was popular. And if you remember, there was a company that produced boxing equipment. They produced trunks and gloves and the turnbuckle, all that. And there was a word on it. So, y'all old folk, y'all know, say it with me together. There you go. And even as a child, I wow, everlast. The only problem is, just like everything else on earth, that equipment wears out. But see, God's love is everlasting. It never ends. It is eternal. It will never come to an end. That's how much he loves us. And so it's our comfort. Oh, I love this Psalm 119:76. May your unfailing, is that word again, unfailing love be my comfort according to your promise to your servant. God makes a promise to us. God says, I promise you that my love will never end. That's my promise. And if you keep your promise, you know what that's like. A promise kept. God won't break his promise. Here the writer says, may your unfailing love be my comfort according to your promise. And that's why it's so important for us as parents to keep our word. If we say we're going to do something, get it done. And finally, God's love is a pure gift. Romans 3:24, yet now God declares us not guilty of offending him if we trust in Jesus, who in his kindness freely takes away our sins. He comes to us and he doesn't hold anything against us. He takes away our guilt. You know, guilt is an incredible evil. It has the potential to sap our energy, our potential. take away and squelch God's gift in us because we're guilty. There's some in this audience today that you can't move ahead in your Christian life because the guilt you feel over your past is keeping you from moving forward. You've been asked to serve and you say, no, I can't serve, but you didn't tell anybody why. And the why is because you feel unworthy. The why is because you feel your past can't be forgiven. The reason is because you can't believe that God will fix the situation through you. You just feel like, I just can't do it because guilt has overcome you. There's a song that we used to sing in youth group way back in the day. And it says this, I am loved. I am loved. I can risk loving you. For the one who knows me best loves me most. Stop there for just a second. Because the idea here is this. The one who knows me best loves me most. But our way of thinking is, if you really knew me, but back to verse 1, for those on the screen, it says, so I said, if you knew, you wouldn't want me. My scars are hidden by the face I wear. Isn't that just like us? Some of us have some scars, but we put on a face. And that face protects us. That face keeps folk from seeing our scars. Get enough makeup on that and we can cover it right up so no one gets to see. And that's the thought of the writer. The writer says, I said if you knew you wouldn't want me. My scars are hidden by the face I wear. And then it says, speaking of God, he said, my child, my scars go deeper. And it was love for you that put them there. See, God, when he put Jesus on the cross, he was on that cross and he suffered and bled and died and the thorns were put on his head and he was beaten. Why? For you and for me. And wherever you are today, whatever you feel your imperfections are, Jesus says, my scars go deeper than yours and they are there because they were put there for you. And so we can love each other because he loved us first. He knows every doubt I have. He knows every failure I've made, every temptation I struggle with, every sidetrack journey I've taken, and yet he loves me to the core of my being. He doesn't define me by my weaknesses, but by that which he created me to be. We need to walk in victory. No matter what your past is, that's what the church ought to be about. We ought to say that is your past and he died for your past, but he also died so that you could have a future. So our only recourse is to trust God, to rely on his ability to change us. Isaiah 40, verse 28 to 31, and part of this is a part of scripture that we loved. I mean, we like to repeat it. It's that wonderful verse. But here's the context. Beginning in verse 28, he says, do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. For he gives strength to the weary and increase the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. Oh, verse 31, this is the one we love so much. But those who hope in the Lord, the King James says who trust, but those who hope in the Lord will do what? Renew their strength. What will happen? They will soar on eagle's wings. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and they will not faint. Why? Because they trust in the Lord. Their hope is in God. They believe in God. Today you may have come in overburdened. You may have come in sick and tired of being sick and tired. You may have come in with the chatter of the world in your ear saying that you won't ever amount to anything. But God steps into the breach of your life and he says to you, trust in me. Hope in the Lord. For when we trust him and hope in him, he says we won't grow weary. We won't faint. We need hope. In September 1988, Hurricane Gilbert hit the Louisiana coast. At the time, it was considered to be the storm of the century. It battered the seashore, severely disrupting the shrimping business. Many shrimp boats were lost. If you go back and look at the pictures of that time, boats are strewn everywhere, and everyone was afraid that their livelihoods had ended. On the morning news, they interviewed one of the shrimpers. And they asked him what was his thoughts about the devastation and the impact to his industry. The man looked and says, well, there's a good side. The storm will have stirred up the bottom of the ocean, making for better shrimping once we're able to get back out there. The man understood hope. He understood hope. See, he could have sat there and said, my life is over. I put everything into this. Every nickel I had, every dime I had, I put into my boat. My boat has now been destroyed, and I don't know where to turn. I guess I'll just curl up in the corner, and I'll just die because it's all over. But he understood that there was hope. He says, listen, out there right now, there's shrimp walking all over the place, crawling all under the ocean. And once I'm able to get myself back up on my feet, once I'm able to get a boat back in the water, once I'm able to get my crew back on that boat, and we go out, God's going to allow us once again to shrimp. Some of y'all have been to New Orleans since Gilbert. Some of y'all have been down there and eaten shrimp since Gilbert. See, you got to have hope. You got to believe that God is able to do exceedingly, abundantly, above all that we could ever ask or imagine. That's what God is able to do when we have hope. That's what God is able to bring about in our life when we don't see it as a disaster, but we see God is able to bring something out of nothing. Church, that's what I want us to take away today, that there's hope. There's hope. Your situation isn't over, and it's not over until Jesus bursts the sky, calls us home to our heavenly rest. That's when it's over. That's when it's over. Until then, God says, there is hope. There is hope. There is hope.